We have the new monthly open for the month of June, and the question of the day is Bitcoin up only from here, or is there something else to be considering? And before we get into today's analysis, I should let you know that we actually got a summer sale going on for the next couple weeks here with all of the programs and services included in the Teachable School, which you can find a link to in the description below. The code is summer like SUMMER in all capitals, and then the number 2 and 0, summer 20, summer in all capitals. You can literally get everything for 20% off. On top of that, you can even get 7 days free trial on all of our subscription services. So check it out there if you've been interested in such things. And I want to first start off this analysis on a different note. I want to start it off with a Twitter post that I created yesterday, or a Twitter poll I created yesterday, which was the next 30% move will be either up or down. If it's up, let's call it like 130,000. If it's down, let's call it about 70,000 bucks. And I thought the results were quite interesting here. After about a little under 2,400 votes, so decent sample size, there was almost a 70% favor of upside. So, just want to say that, hey, if you do want to be a contrarian, because everyone always talks about everyone's this way and I'm going to be that way. If you really do want to be a contrarian, it actually would be down here, I suppose. Now, I love being a contrarian as well, but right now it is kind of difficult to see 70,000 bucks, just personally speaking. But hey, just figured I'd rather, share this stat right here, because I do understand that a lot of people are always searching for what everyone else is doing so that they can definitely do the opposite on the other side. Anyways, let's now bring this into an actual analysis. So I want to start off this analysis by saying, hey, on the shorter term timeframes, just as we said in yesterday's video and the day prior than that, Bitcoin probably going to bounce. It already has been bouncing since the last couple of days, coming up all the way from 103 to now a high of just under 106. I still think that it could bounce a little bit more as well, but we're going to be focusing on the higher term timeframes for today. So I want to go back into the June statistics data in the same way that we looked at the likely date for lows in June. I want to now look for the likely date of highs in June. And we can also look at the difference between the open of the month and the high of the month as well. So I've gone through all of these Junes here. I've written it down. I've taken the numbers. I've done the studies, and I found these were the answers right here. So Bitcoin, not January highs. This is indeed June. That's just a little bit of a missed typo. But yes, if we are looking at just the times when June was closing positively, the high of the month came in actually between the second and third week of June. So this data for June, just like the Bitcoin June lows, is decently different than almost every other June, almost every other month. Because typically what we'd find is that for positive closing months, a lot of the time we'd see that high coming in around the end of the third week to the beginning of the fourth week, somewhere in that sort of spread there. But we see something different here happening consistently earlier. In fact, only once have we even seen the high of June come in on the end of on the end, like literally last week of June, and that was in 2015 on the 29th. Other than that, it's been consistently around about the third week, in many cases even before that. I mean, this is easily the earliest one that I think we've seen to date. Anyways, on the other side, when we have seen negative June closures, the high of the month is a lot more consistent with what we have seen on other months, in that you typically expect that high to come in very early within the month. In this case, the average is just below 5 days. The median would be about 3.5. So if you are bearish, you're effectively looking for the high to occur of this month on whatever this rally is, before this first week is over, basically. Probably even, by tomorrow or Wednesday, because that would be effectively above the median at that point. So just something to keep in mind. Of course, we can also look at the, I did it again here. Again, this is Bitcoin June. I can assure you that I literally just recorded all of this morning, but the differential between the open of the month and the high of the month, we do have data for that as well. I bifurcated it as well between positive and negative closing Junes. And when we have seen a positive closing June, the differential between the open of the month and the high of the month has been about 25.5%, let's say, the average and the median, very, very, very similar there. So, seeing as we already have the open of June, and if those stats were to play out and you are bullish for June, then, expecting a move towards about 130 is not out of it's not out of like left field. That's actually rather reasonable. Again, assuming that you are bullish, like these people over here, that actually is, or you do have, good reason to be looking for something like that to happen in June. Again, if you are expecting a positive closing June. On the other side, when you get a negative closing June, the differential between the open of the month and the high of the month has been about 4% to 4.5%. So you still would be looking for probably an early rally, as we looked at on the dates, within probably before the end of the first week, or definitely before the end of the first week. But taking these numbers in mind, what would 4 or 4.5% look like? That would put Bitcoin back at around 110 to 110.5. I should note that even that number would not be trading back above the last lower high that Bitcoin had right here on May 26th at 110.750. But yeah, again, just things to consider here as we do get through this analysis. So those are the stats, or the remaining stats that we have for June. Now, putting this into a more sort of technical, package, let's now go look at some of the other signals that we have been looking at on this channel and following here. And of course, now that Bitcoin does have a new daily, 2-day, 3-day, 5-day, even a 10-day, and now a monthly, I do want to go through all of the higher term timeframe stochastic momentum oscillators, which as of right now, the 5-day timeframe is going to be hinting at a cross to the downside on the next period. The next period will actually not close until Wednesday night. When it does, if Bitcoin is below 110,000 US dollars, we will see the first 5-day stochastic momentum cross to the downside. Basically fresh one since late January, which is kind of crazy. On top of that, the 3-day time frame is already headed down, and that one's pivoted at 111,500. The 2-day time frame is also pivoted down, coming down hard as well. That one's pivoted at 110 as well. The daily time frame is also coming down rather hard as well, I would add, as long as Bitcoin's below about 109. So we do now see the daily, 2-day, 3-day, and 5-day effectively all on the same side. And I think the weekly has not turned yet, but the current pivot is at 97,000. So it's getting closer and closer. It's cutting it close right there. So what is the sort of picture that I'm trying to paint? Bitcoin can and certainly can also afford a pullback to open up the month of June. I'm not saying like it's bearish and it's going to zero or anything like this. I'm not even saying it's going down to fucking $70,000. I think that's probably unlikely, at least in the short term. But looking at those sort of setups, whenever I see all of those higher term timeframes agree with each other, usually it's better to be betting in that general direction. Those signals are going to be also combined with the 5-day RSI right here, which did fire off a drive of bearish divergence. That was on the last 5-day closure right here. Of course, we'd really want to see this current 5-day closure close below the low of the prior now at 103,600. If you see something like that, I do think there's a very, 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 very good chance that you're going to see a move back down below $100,000. Again, I'm not calling this like a massive reversal or anything like this. Probably going to be a higher low. At least that would be my sort of anticipation on the first move down below $100,000. Probably going to be an opportunity, in other words. But it is there, and we do see several things now aligning with each other from different vicinities. On top of that, we do have the famous 5 EMA, the red moving average right here, reconnect to be looking forward to, which happens nearly every month. Almost every month in Bitcoin's history, we see Bitcoin at some point reconnect with that moving average. And in the event that it doesn't, Bitcoin typically does not really trade outside of the overall range. What do I mean by that? Well, you can see this instance over here in December of 2024. Bitcoin obviously closed well above the 5 EMA without reconnecting with it. The next month, Bitcoin basically traded sideways until it did reconnect with it. Again, it doesn't need to happen necessarily on each and every closure, but when you don't see it reconnect, things typically don't move that far away from that from that current range. Anyways, in this case, the red 5 EMA is just below $98,000 at 97,700. So again, if Bitcoin did come down around there on a correction, I think that would be completely fine. Again, that would still be at least technically speaking, bullish on the first pass. I mean, it's still a higher low on pretty much any time frame that matters. But we'd really be expecting Bitcoin to bounce, significantly from there, and most importantly, trade up to new highs from there this month. Maybe not 130, but I would be really expecting decently new highs this month if that is indeed going to play out. But as of right now, it's just a potential. And yes, on the first pass, I would definitely be expecting at least a bounce, assuming that things do get down around there. On top of all of this, we got the new weekly HPDR, and the HPDR on the weekly did close below the top side of the 38.2 level, indicating a bit of a corrective phase after living above it for a few closures. And the 38.2 level is actually even shifted up here. So it does give us kind of a ceiling for the current period at around about 109.250 if Bitcoin were to get there. Which again does imply that short term, a corrective phase is more likely than not. We're seeing volatility contract here. Whenever you see volatility contract and price action is very far away from the median, you're probably going to be at some point getting a test to that median at minimum. Now, it doesn't need to happen this week, to be fair, because right now the median's all the way down at like $92,000. I don't think it's happening this week. And yes, once we see the next weekly open coming into next Monday, you will see this very, very likely shift significantly up. I would imagine it probably comes up to around $98,000. And at that point, you probably get your test as well. 5-day time frame, about the same thing here. Again, this one also looking for that median. This one's already come up to about $99,000. So, I do look at these areas as great areas of interest for, a pullback target plus extremely likely a bounce around these regions. But, that would imply that the short term, does come down. And when we go back to this data over here, if you recall from the end of last week when we went over the Bitcoin June lows data, Bitcoin in June is kind of a weird month compared to all the other months. The low of the month, even for positive closing Junes on average, is one of the latest, or in fact, it is the latest that I can recall, with a lot of the lows coming in at the end of the second week of June, even if, again, June closed positively, aka bullish, which usually you see it a lot earlier on within the month, like before the end of the first week. But in this particular one, we do not see that. We see it more often than not actually actually putting in the low of the month after the first week and before the end of the second week. So, just something to kind of chew on and consider, because if Bitcoin did want to play out a downside move, it probably happens early on within this month. And then you'd be expecting Bitcoin to have an epic, heroic bounce back above, certainly back above about 103 before end of month. Why do I say 103? Well, we also have the new monthly open for June, and the monthly stochastic momentum pivot has actually remained about the same from May to June. This one now about 103,750. More importantly, that does imply if Bitcoin is going to be bullish for June, we really expect Bitcoin to remain above this pivot. And I would say if Bitcoin is below this pivot by the end of the second week, or certainly if it's before the end of the third week, that to me would be a good indication that this is actually going to be playing down the opposite direction, and Bitcoin will be living below there for a while, because we do see, there is bearish divergence here. There is, it has lost a critical zone. So there are signals, to be fair, but as of right now, again, not actionable. And Bitcoin can easily afford a pullback, like I said, to around $98,000, give or take a few from that number, and then bounce back above about 103, 104 by end of month. And if you are bullish, you really are. I really would be expecting Bitcoin to make decently new highs this month. Probably close to 120. Anyways, I think that's a good place for me to be leaving off on this particular video. It's a nice and short and sweet one, as always. Again, just reminding you that if you do want the summer sale for 20% off, you can just go over here into the Teachable School, type in that summer20 coupon code, and that'll apply to literally anything in a way that we haven't had before. Like literally anything that we offer, 20% off, all good. Anyways, that's what we'll be ending it for today. Take care, much love, and see you hopefully Tuesday.